What's going on at the college level and the colleges, Columbia, NYU, and others, is a disgrace. And it's really on Biden. He has the wrong signal.
The president should condemn it in totally unambiguous terms. He was very wishy-washy yesterday.
President Biden has been unequivocal in his comments. Silence is complicity. Threatening and intimidation is anti-Semitism.
Well, these protests have picked up. As you look at a map around the country, top colleges are seeing a lot more protests, anti-Israel, sometimes very anti-Semitic. We've heard lawmakers weigh in on all sides. Where does this go, and what does it mean politically? Let's bring in our panel. Start there. Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, host of the Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. Josh Holmes, co-host of the Ruthless podcast, former chief of staff to Senator Mitch McConnell, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Leslie, Mark Levin on his show had a compilation of public reports, and he tweeted out, the dark money Democrat billionaires and Islamist networks pay for and organize this. He cited a number of different articles, one of them in the New York Post. Groups backed behind Israel bashing protests, backing Hamas attacks, got $15 million plus from George Soros. The Open Society Foundation's records show sources grant-making network gave $13.7 million through the Tide Center. Goes on, and there's a number of different public reports that examine the money that funnels into these organizations. We do see it is pretty organized. The tents all look the same, and it's expanding. What do you make of that effort and what it means politically for Democrats?
Politically for Democrats, look, when you look at Michigan as an example, and you have a very large Arab population, that could certainly hurt Joe Biden because it's going to come down to, 5 states, and Michigan is one of them. And there is a growing of this. Here is my problem. And I think you guys know, I think I'm the only member of the Jewish tribe on the panel. I'm married to a Muslim. I have sympathy and empathy on both sides of this issue strongly. And to be anti-Israel is one thing, and we have a right as Americans to do that. To be pro-Palestinian, wanting a ceasefire in Gaza, concerned about forthcoming famine, that's also covered under our First Amendment. To support Hamas, a terrorist organization, absolutely not. And to be anti-Semitic, absolutely not. You can be anti-Israel and not be anti-Semitic. There are many very prominent Jews, Jon Stewart, just to name one, who are not anti-Semitic, but, are, anti-Israel stance on this issue. Politically, I think this actually could hurt the president. However, Brett, what the people who are protesting, I'm not saying pro-Hamas or anti-Semitic, those who are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, what they forget is the alternative is Donald Trump. If they stay home, it could be Donald Trump. If they vote for Donald Trump, it could be Donald Trump. If they vote for a third-party candidate, it could be Donald Trump. That's not going to get them their two-state solution. And honestly, breaking the law, closing universities isn't going to do that either, unless we do end up with a Vietnam situation with the protests we had then, or civil rights. Just to follow up on that original thing about the funding, here is a former Treasury anti-terrorism analyst. He's talking about Students for Justice in Palestine, these groups that are popping up.
There's now 200 campuses that have SJP. They use a lot of the same rhetoric. They use a lot of the same devices on campuses, the different means of protests. There is a lot of commonality that we see nationwide. They have been wielded as a student army by this group. An obfuscated money trail, to put it mildly, but we can see that there are organizers behind all of this.
Guy.
Yeah, some of the hate from these rallies is certainly organic, and that's undeniable and very disturbing. But the money behind it is, I think, a question that needs to be explored, not just by the government, if there's any particular ties to terrorism, but by some enterprising journalists here and elsewhere. Follow the money is a mantra in journalism. This is ripe for that. I think that's important to point out. And he was just talking about SJP, that organization, in the very earliest days after October 7th, before Israel had even begun its military response. SJP was out there agitating, really in favor of Hamas, celebrating the attack against innocent Israeli civilians. And they put on some of their posters that were distributed by the national group images of paragliders, a clear reference to one of the ways that terrorists infiltrated Israeli territory. That is a glorification of mass murder, And those are chapters that are all over the country on almost every campus right now. That is extremely upsetting, particularly to Jewish students who see this happening on their campuses and in many cases wonder if administrations actually have their back.
You know, it's interesting, Josh. They had to change their chants. It was, we want a ceasefire, but Hamas turned down the last 2 ceasefire negotiations.
No, absolutely.
Now it's not ceasefire. They want basically Hamas to win in a lot of these chants.
It's pro-Hamas, right? I mean, there's nobody out there that's chanting two-state solution, two-state solution. That's not what's happening here. I mean, look, the cold reality is that Hamas has a constituency within the progressive left in this country. And it is a constituency even more sad. I'm not saying that to be provocative. It's a fact. But it's a constituency even more sadly that I think the Biden administration has concluded they can't win a national election without. It's part of the reason why you saw Joe Biden out saying, well, of course I condemn anti-Semitism. I also condemn people who don't understand the plight of the Palestinians. He's triangulating, attempting not to lose ground with a constituency that's out in front of all of us. And this is a progressive Democratic voting base, which is a scary proposition.
Leslie, are you worried about Chicago, the DNC? I mean, could it be 1968 all over again?
Look, I'm honest. You guys know that. Yeah, there's a concern. My concern there should be no violence. I mean, what makes our nation great is our freedom and our ability to have that freedom to speak out against our government, to speak out against other governments, not be arrested for that. But, you can't, stop traffic. Again, I don't see this being effective. What is effective is voting. Right. And if you're going to stay home or vote for the guy that's going to be least effective in what you want, which is a ceasefire, a 2-state solution, trying to head off the famine, then you're barking up the wrong tree, and your protests aren't going to lead to your goal.
Right. Obviously, Republicans see a political vulnerability here for Democrats. You have Speaker Johnson going to Columbia tomorrow to talk to students, hold a press conference. On the flip side, you have President Biden in Florida talking about abortion, something that he sees and they see as a major vulnerability for Republicans. I mean, that's what we're setting up here for the next 6 months.
Biden would much rather talk about abortion through the framing that he wants to use, which is often, I think, a distortion, than this issue. Because when someone asked the question yesterday about the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, instantly we got this both sidesism that I thought was just morally repulsive, frankly, coming from the president. Then another reporter jumped in to ask him about abortion, his favorite subject, and he was sort of nasty to that reporter who was throwing him a lifeline, which was a bit odd. But yeah, this is definitely sort of the shape-up for the upcoming election. Democrats are going to try to focus as much as they can on the flaws of Donald Trump and abortion, and Republicans clearly have a lot of other targets to talk about politically.
And 10 seconds, how much does the Trump trial dominate, or trials dominate, this political conversation?
Well, I think it dominates the political conversation. I think it has not even a little bit of impact on the American electorate at this point. I think that's showing up in poll after poll. People are focused on their own stuff and what you can do as president rather than what this sort of charade is going on in a courtroom.
We will see. We'll follow it all. Panel, thanks.